Harriet Hageman is a senior litigation attorney, and I'm pleased to have her on the program now. She's got an interesting story about how Title IX worked in her benefit and helped her in life, and now a perspective that maybe Title IX, which is kind of what Joe Biden cited in the executive order, is being mistreated. Harriet Hageman, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you on the program. First of all, you have some experience in the Rocky Mountain region, Wyoming. You went to school there, and Title IX actually came to your benefit. So, senior litigation attorney Harriet Hageman, tell me your story here.
All right, wonderful. Well, I'm senior litigation attorney with the New Civil Liberties Alliance. I actually live in Wyoming, but I commute back to Washington, D.C. on a fairly regular basis. And we have been doing some Title IX work because my firm, as the title of our firm says, is civil liberties. We focus on civil liberties and due process and making sure that our leaders and our politicians are following the Constitution, including the due process requirements associated with things such as investigation of allegations of sexual abuse or sexual harassment or that sort of thing. But my story really was very interesting because I think that I'm one of the first people that really benefited, or the first generation that really benefited from Title IX. I entered seventh grade in 1975, so I'm giving you an idea of how old I am, but I went to a very small school here in Wyoming, and we had boys' sports, but we didn't have very many girls' sports. But I happened to be with a group of girls that were quite athletic. We went to the principal, said we wanted a girls' basketball team and a girls' track team. And, of course, because of Title IX and the non-discrimination requirements based on sex, we were able to do that. And I really do credit the ability to participate in athletics and a variety of other things for the success that I've been able to experience in my life. I'm a trial attorney. I've been practicing law for over 30 years. I have handled a lot of very high-profile cases in Wyoming and elsewhere, and been actually quite successful in what I do. I fight primarily fighting against the federal government is what I have done. The EPA, USDA, Fish and Wildlife Service, Forest Service, those kinds of agencies. But because of that beginning, because at 12 years old we were out there running around, competing, participating in group events, it really did develop our personalities and our confidence and all of those things in a wonderful way. Had we competed against boys, we never would have had that opportunity. And so from a personal experience, and then also the ag work that I've done, which we can talk about if you'd like to do that as well, but just from the standpoint of having an opportunity as a young woman to be able to compete in single-sex sports, I think that it was very important.
The voice of Harriet Hageman. She's a senior litigation attorney for the New Civil Liberties Alliance, Ncla. She's a Wyoming girl. She commutes back and forth to Washington, D.C. So, Harriet, Title IX benefited you, and it's benefited females up until current day, and giving them access to competition and competing. But now you have President Biden has come in and signed an executive order that I think misuses Title IX, and it basically says if you may be a biological boy, but if you claim to be or identify as a female or a girl, then you have access. Title IX protects you, and you can now compete in the girls' side of things. In your estimation, is that a misuse of what Title IX was intended to do?
Absolutely. It very clearly is. And you used a couple of terms in your introduction, such as common sense, which we all have. We can figure this out. You also talked about being a biology science denier, and that's also a circumstance. Girls and boys are different than each other. We've known that from the beginning of time. Yet all of a sudden in the last year or year and a half, we are trying to erase the distinctions between girls and boys. And from the standpoint of a woman, I take great offense at it because I believe that we're erasing women. When you look at Title IX, it is very simple. This isn't complicated. It says that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. This was adopted in 1972. We know what Congress meant. What Congress meant was boys and girls. That's what they meant. If you are a traditionalist, if you are an originalist, if you believe that our Constitution needs to be interpreted based upon the words that were used at the time that they were written, then no one can interpret that to determine that a boy should be able to compete against girls or hotel room when they go on school trips. You simply cannot interpret it that way. What's also important for people to understand is that Joe Biden's executive order does not itself carry the force and effect of law. But what he's done is he's instructed all federal agencies to interpret that language to mean exactly what you're saying, which is we have to treat boys as though they're girls and girls as though they're boys. That isn't what Title IX says. It wasn't what the intent of the law was from the beginning. It is a distortion of that. If Congress wants to change it, they can do it, but Joe Biden can't, and these agencies cannot. And that includes every agency, whether it's USDA or it's the Department of Education or the Department of Labor. They're all being instructed that they have to treat girls and boys as though they are fungible. They're one and the same thing. And that isn't true. And girls and women are going to be the ones that suffer from this policy.
The voice of Harriet Hageman is my guest, and glad to have her here. This interview, by the way, when we're done, will go up at jimmylakey.com for you to pass around and share. If you think, my goodness, I need somebody else to hear this, you'll be able to access it at jimmylakey.com in just a moment. Harriet has been a trial attorney for almost 30 years and with the Ncla, New Civil Liberties Alliance now, and she's a senior litigation attorney. Let me ask you, so the executive order does not have it's not the rule of law. However, now we have the Equality Act that's gone through the House of Representatives that kind of codifies some of this same type of gender reassignment and gender conversations. And so we have a real mess, and now in school districts may want to rebel against it and say, well, it's an executive order, but they could be at risk of funding, and the Department of Education could come after them. If Equality Act makes it through the Senate as is, now it's codified into law, we have a real mess going on, because it could be very soon more than just an executive order that districts can ignore.
Yes, and it is a very, very dangerous act. The Equality Act is not about equality. The Equality Act is about forcing us to acknowledge things that do not truly exist. I don't think that I ever imagined in my lifetime that I would see congressional representatives moving to, again, erase essentially the important differences and distinctions between girls and boys and men and women. If it succeeds, I am concerned that we will no longer have single-sex sports. You will have co-ed sports and you will have boys sports, but you will not have single-sex sports for girls. We've seen what has happened in Connecticut. We have seen what has happened in wrestling matches. We have seen what has happened in the boxing ring. We have seen what has happened in our cycling tournaments. Right now, look at what we're facing with Olympics coming up, and whether biological boys are going to be able to compete against girls. Title IX was a breakthrough civil rights act that helped people like little 12-year-old Harriet Hageman in 1975. We are now interpreting it and moving towards an Equality Act that is anything but furthering equality. And again, from the standpoint of a woman and a girl who benefited from having single-sex athletics and being able to participate in other things, such as I was one of the first girls in the country to compete in livestock judging. And I was able to do that starting in high school when I started taking ag classes in high school because, again, in 1972, Title IX said you can't prevent Harriet from Hageman from taking ag classes and learning how to weld or build pig barns or judge livestock or be involved in Future Farmers of America just because she's a girl. And it provided huge advantages, again, for my lifelong career in terms of my speaking ability and my confidence and all of those things. But right now we're moving backwards at lightning speed when it comes to women's rights, which we account for 50 or over 50% of the population, in order to address what is a very small percentage of the population. And between you and I, it's not common sense and it doesn't make sense.
Harriet Hageman is my guest, and again, she's a senior litigation attorney with Ncla, which is New Civil Liberties Alliance. Harriet, I have the Colorado High School Athletic or Activities Association's bylaws, Article 3, and it talks about transgender participation here in Colorado, and this is going to hit home for a lot of Colorado families listening to this program. They recognize the right of a transgender student-athlete to participate in interscholastic activities free from unlawful discrimination based on their orientation. And here's what it says: to ensure appropriate gender assignment For purposes of athletic eligibility, a transgender student athlete's home school will perform a confidential evaluation to determine the gender assignment for the prospective student athlete. CHASA will then review the athletic eligibility decision based on the gender assignment of the transgender student athlete in accordance with approved policies and appeals procedures. That's a lot of legalese to me, but it sounds like here in Colorado, the thing is you had to have been assigned differently or had a surgery before you can compete. But that doesn't change anything. The body parts you have or don't have, it changes nothing. So even if that's the CHASA rule that you can't just identify as something, you have to actually be evaluated and show that you have been assigned that. That doesn't mean anything. It's still unequal on the playing field for the boys and the girls.
I agree with that, and I also will go back to the idea that I don't like using the word assigned at all because I don't think anything is assigned. I think you're a boy or a girl. There's nothing that is assigned. It is determined from the moment of conception. So I think we've got to stop using some of that terminology as well. And I realize you were reading what they're saying, but at the same time, that's the other thing that I think is astoundingly. We find ourselves in a very strange moment in time where we're talking about using medications and surgery on very young people to address what this entire issue that I think most of us are looking around and saying, even a year ago, this would be considered ludicrous. 5 years ago, it would have been considered absolutely unheard of that we would even be talking about physically and chemically altering young kids and high school kids for the purposes of athletics or anything else. And again, we're headed down a very, very, very strange road on this idea of Title IX when Title IX was never intended to do what it is that they're trying to force it to do. So, I think that it's very important for parents to be involved. It's very important for people to be asking their legislators and their congressional representatives, what in the world are they doing and why are they doing it? But I also think we need to take a step back and think, what are the long-term implications, both legally as well as physically, for all of these kids? And again, from the standpoint of a girl, I know in 7th grade I could not compete against the boys in basketball. There was no way to do it. We had to have our own basketball team. It's the same with track, and it's the same across the country. Yeah. Are there outliers where there might be a circumstance where a girl could beat a boy? Sure, absolutely. Is that going to be the general rule with how these kids participate in athletics? No, it's not. Yeah. And from the standpoint of male and female biology, they're different. They are. Yeah. You and I know it. Everybody with common sense knows it. You look at boys, they're bigger than girls for the most part. Vast majority. Yeah. It just simply doesn't make sense.
Harriet Hageman is my guest. And again, if folks want to learn more about the New Civil Liberties Alliance, Ncla, I'll let you give a plug for that. Harriet, I'm sure you're probably going to be watching this in court and maybe even a part of some litigation on these policies, especially if they get codified into law. I'm sure you'll be helping out some folks. Tell us about Ncla.
Well, Ncla was started by the very important legal scholar Philip Hamburger. He's a professor at Columbia University, and really one of our motto is let judges judge, let legislators legislate, and stop bureaucrats from doing either one. We're a nonprofit civil rights organization, and we seek to protect the freedoms from violations, our freedoms and our liberties. We focus really on the constitutional construct and our constitutional framework. Our interest in litigation is, it's all pro bono, and we strive to tame the unlawful power of the administrative state. And really what we focus on is we want to make sure that there is the separation of powers, which is built into our Constitution. We do not believe that bureaucrats ought to be making law. We believe that our congressional representatives and our legislators are the ones that are to make law. The executive branch is to carry out that law, and the judicial branch is to judge it. I'll just read you a quote from Philip Hamburger because I think it really kind of encapsulates who we are.
Very quickly, because I'm running real short on time.
Administrative power is all about the evasion of governance through law, including an evasion of constitutional processes and procedural rights. That's what we seek to fight.
The website, ma'am?
It is nclalegal.org.
NCLAlegal.org. Harriet Hageman, it's a pleasure. I appreciate your insight and your expertise here on the topic, and I do have to run, but thank you very much, and glad to have you here on the show. NCLAlegal.org if you want more information.